We've had a very interesting thing go on. So Dunkey, the YouTuber, is starting a publisher. And as sometimes happens when people step out of their lane online, especially if they work in new media and they're kind of looked, down upon by certain groups, he's been completely roasted by it. Now there's actually a lot of people coming in with, wish you the best, good luck, but also a lot of people bringing up, to be honest, really kind of crazy stuff. I'm just going to bring up this tweet here purely because it friggin' exploded. It was like one of the first tweets that exploded in this, and it encapsulates something. This is not a video that is just saying people made tweets and now we're going to talk about them. The point of today's video is to talk about actually starting a publisher, what's going on, because funny enough, that's all something that we have been fairly interested in for a while. But obviously, walk before you can run. We're all a game studio first. We gotta get our games out. More about that soon. But this one was just, lol, Dunkey starting a publishing company with the ethos, I have played so many games I know what makes them good and bad, so I will publish good ones. About to learn some stuff the hard way. And it's kind of funny there, and I've seen a few others that are just like, moron. Basically just that. Kind of going into the doomerism. But when we actually look at even, say what, I like Jason Schreier's dunk. Can't believe Dunkey started a video game publisher with no experience. Instead of taking the normal approach, getting a Harvard MBA, working at McKinsey for 5 years, and failing upward between C-suites.
Yeah, that's the difference between a publisher like, what Ubisoft are kind of doing at the minute, where they kind of clearly don't really know what people actually want, versus someone like Devolver. Because you can tell people at Devolver are like, they have that sense of, well, that's going to work. That's going to work for our audience, so we'll do it.
Yeah, like, do you want the Videogamedunkey or Yves Guillemot?
Yeah, that's exactly it, where obviously everyone's looking at the other side going, well, also don't forget Devolver also have all this experience in publishing and stuff like that, but they didn't to begin with, as far as I understand. It was just, hey, we've got some money, hey, that game looks cool as hell, let's do that. And obviously that was in a bit of a different time with Hotline Miami and stuff, so I was going to be like, I guess the market was less crowded then, but at the same time, it's like, that is definitely a skill set you absolutely need. It is one small part of the skill set you need, but it is something that is exceedingly important. And if you are someone who's worked in new media, then you have that, as Dunkey gets into, there is that sense of, you understand how your audience think and how your audience work, what they respond to. And if you're especially someone at the top, like the top of their game, like he is, as much as it may not represent, because his content is very like irreverent and very kind of a little bit out there in terms of it seems like he sits down and just takes the piss and that's it. But you don't see all the work that goes in behind actually planning that content and stuff like that.
Almost as if it's a comedy channel. Yeah. That's what he's good at.
Yeah, so that's the thing where I think people see the persona that he presents and go, oh, well, how's that fucking goofy like lunatic supposed to run a business properly and understand this really? It's like, no, that skill set is definitely there.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing too, we have a publishing deal with our game. So I can actually talk you through literally what it is like securing a publishing deal, what it's like working with a publisher, what a publisher actually does. Because while we do YouTube stuff, our game, The Pale Beyond, which you can wishlist on Steam, I believe actually as the demo, it's the older demo. We've got a far newer, more sexy demo in a little while, but you can play a bit of a demo and wishlist it on Steam, which of course we would very much appreciate. Now, that is a game that is published by Fellow Traveler. Fellow Traveler are a publisher. We had to go secure that publishing deal, and between our two companies, we both, we both do different things that result in video games getting out there. And once the video games are out there, there's obviously the whole, revenue sharing waterfall between the whole lot of us. So I can walk you through that in the context of Dunkey starting this up, and hopefully today we can help everybody understand what's actually going on, the sorts of pitfalls that Dunkey and Leah could fall into,
Lots of them.
The things that they perhaps would rather likely be doing to not fall into those pitfalls. Because one of the things that I found is, with the tweets that are far more this energy, and there's been a humongous amount of them, which is why I bring it up. This is just one example. Because a lot of people are kind of, I think, engaging in bad faith, assuming the worst, also assuming that this person is just a stupid YouTuber buffoon, because they don't really understand the process of, say, making a comedy video, editing it super tightly. They They don't understand any of that. They also don't understand, perhaps, that he's actually a real person and that the output of a comedy YouTube channel may in fact not be the totality of his being and output and may not reflect everything. He's obviously going to be a pretty smart guy to get to that level in the first place. And it turns out, I mean, I would say that if you want to start a publisher and it's like, okay, you have an audience, you have a lot of experience working with an audience, and obviously you have a lot of funding, that's a fantastic place to start off a publisher.
Sure is.
I mean, there are so many publishers that start because people are able to get some investing money, and there's a few things that they may be good at, but actually getting a game out there into people's hands, they may not be good at that, right? So we're going to be able to get into this. Bigmode is the name of the publishing house, founded in 2022 by Jason and Leah, right? So they're, I guess, a power couple.
Yep.
In this. That's awesome. They say they want to support games with substance, quality, creativity, and fun. The indie game world can feel crowded or oversaturated, so their goal is to give great games a powerful way to stand out. This is a really important thing. Here's a great example of a game that we highlighted on a few of the shows. Mini Healer.
Oh yeah, Mini Healer.
Awesome game. Fucking evangelizing it, and it's. I don't know how many sales we drove for that game, but it was enough that it was pretty cool to see. Actually, the developer commented on it. They seemed very thankful. And it's just one of those things, let's just say we were a publisher of games and we scouted Mini Healer a while ago. We're like, hey, we think you're making an awesome game. Also, our audience, kind of like MMO players and RPG players, I feel like this would be a natural alliance between us. And that would have been a really good example of how somebody with, audience or whatever, like us, or of course, like Dunkey, at a far larger scale, could actually do for finding an indie. And that's really what all of this is. I mean, I'm not going to say what publisher it was. I'm not going to say what person it was. But I remember talking to, just sitting around one of the EGXs, somebody that, they had a bit of a chip on their shoulder because they passed up Dead Cells. Whoops.
Yeah.
But that is what the scouting game is like in the indie space. You need top-tier scouts that know what games are going to be trendsetters, that know what either a game that is super niche and well executed, that means it will get deep penetration into its limited audience, or the sort of game like, Dead Cells or whatever, or Celeste that can really just...
Yeah, well, that's the fun thing, right?
Bigness.
Because you think about Dead Cells, how do you pass up Dead Cells, right? Especially if you're, if you only see it recently when it's got all this stuff in it, you're like, okay, well, how do you physically pass that up? That's almost, in hindsight, it's really obviously going to be a success. But then you go, well, think about what Dead Cells look like, especially, based on how everyone's talking about GTA and stuff and the whole leaks of early builds. That doesn't look like a video game, this looks like shit. Seeing Dead Cells in its earliest form, seeing an alpha, seeing a couple game design docs, you could very easily go, what are you bringing special here? Because Dead Cells is just, you're hopping onto the roguelike trend of Souls-like action combat. That could work, but also, who the hell are you? Yeah. And obviously that ended up being really well executed. People absolutely love the aesthetic. They love I guess a lot of it is the small details that we're able to go through, which is, everything about this just works. Everything about the flow of it, everything about the combat, the way you can build specifically, all that stuff worked. But we can see that in hindsight as players. But to be able to see that potentiality properly before it's actually done is a completely different level of scouting and skill set, Devolver and Cult of the Lamb. Cult of the Lamb, I look at what that is, I'm like, it's a cute little aesthetic, but it's, it's just, there's nothing particularly new there. And then I actually watch it being played and go, of course this is good. Of course. Yeah,
so the thing there is, is Dunkey going to be, are they going to be publishing, I mean, here's another thing, from the prototype stage, will they be like a lot of indie publishers who are publishing really from the 40 or 50% mark to completion? What will his skill set be in seeing a unpolished prototype that could be the next Dead Cells and thinking, right, what will this be like when the UX is juiced? Yeah. What will this be like when it's polished? Can I get a sense of that? These are the sorts of things, even just on the acquiring game side, that do make it really hard. So it's the sort of thing where, in a way, it does sound great. Calling out games in a crowded market is awesome. The idea of just being like, hey, we want to publish games that look like the games or play like the games that we really like. We want to find the games that we would like to see and make them. And in a way, or not make them, fun of them, in a way they're being ridiculed for that, even though it's like you look at, say, Marquez Brownlee. People are like, hey, Marquez, what's your secret? And he ends up just saying, well, I make things that I would like to see. And that is the process that leads to him having a crazy camera robot and having the team and having all of that, because his North Star is just making stuff that he would want to see. He is his own audience, right? And I think within the publishing space, even within how like we are, making games here, I'd say it's like we're making things that we want to play, things that we want to see. And that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's actually a completely reasonable thing.
Well,
the only difference is, instead of him just knowing what he wants to see, he also is going to be finely attuned to what his audience also want to see, which in fact supercharges that. So one of the things that, almost to a level he's being ridiculed for, is actually a strong inherent strength.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of focus group testing and design by committee and, what will work? Okay, let's get our finest data scientists onto this, because that's a good approach and all, but it's a soulless approach. And that's exactly, what they goes on to talk about with wanting to not make soulless stuff, wanting to kind of go for, okay, well, what is art in this medium? And that's the kind of key of of course there's going to be I don't want to say just detractors, because there are obviously problems with just, hey, here's, we have money, so we'll publish games. It must be really easy. All you need is money and an audience. But, they're smart enough. I'm sure they're aware of all that.
Yeah. So as we go on then, they're saying that they'll have publishing contracts that are designed to be the most developer-friendly possible. Now, what's that actually going to mean? Well, the likes of, say, the developer owning their IP, honestly, that's a given now. So that's not a unique thing. What you're going to be talking about there is things like how the revenue split works. It's honestly the kind of boring, nerdy details. Also, what are rights to merchandising? How are all those things handled?
And even just thinking about from the perspective of, if they're not super worried about hitting a release date, they'll be like, oh yeah, well, do you have a good reason for delaying this? Yeah, work away.
Yeah. What's the size of a milestone?
Yeah.
Here's a really good example. I'll sort of fudge numbers or fudge, dates and stuff.
Details, yeah.
But take for our game, let's just say we have 12 milestones, right? 12 development milestones, and there's our total development budget. We have to do the work that we have agreed upon with the production team at our publisher. We submit that. They then look at what we've done, send back a report, and if we've done what we've said we're going to do, then we get milestone approved, the money is unlocked, that ends up in our account, and we can keep the lights on. Generally, you're either getting a milestone approved, or you're getting a conditional, which is saying, this is approved, but there are problems, and it's implicit there that it's watch out, Thankfully, we've got 0 conditionals, which, funny enough, is actually a really rare thing.
Yeah.
It's a pretty damn rare thing. Delays also a pretty damn common thing. So it's just the way that it is. So all of these things being developer friendly, that's what's important. Now, I think here, a lot's going to depend on the budgets that are being worked on, because if it's 250k, then that's a lot of money. But let's just say that has got to increase whatever percent to 350k, right? That is something that probably would be grand for them. Yeah. But if they take on, let's just say, a $1.5 million budget project, and then, a team of that size, of that burn rate, requires 20% more time, well, now suddenly those things are more expensive, and they cannot be as lenient with their milestones. So there's a whole bunch of things that you then get into, what are the size of the bets that you're making? Are you making a larger quantity of smaller bets, a smaller quantity of larger bets? All different ways. They're, talking about, we're not doing NFT shit, no crypto, no blockchain. Now, there's other sides of it too. I mean, one thing, you do have a media personality attached. That is a strength. It's also a possible weakness. But at the end of the day, any developer who goes to them is knowing that. So I don't really see it as a problem. I think also some people may be taking issue with the video, right? So to do a quote, I've been in YouTube for 11 years now, and one of the core themes of my channel has always been to slam dunk soulish cash grabs into the garbage can. That's fair. Yeah. I know that might hurt the feelings of some people on Twitter, but fuck you out of that, and lift up and praise truly inspired works of art in this medium. Don't see a problem with that. For years and years and years, I have always sought out the very best indie games out there, and I've tried to do them justice, putting millions of eyes on the games that actually deserved attention. Now, some people tried to clown on him for the games that he talked about being like ones that people know that have larger budgets, because there absolutely are indie games that are almost like AA indie. Maybe not that large, but take Devolver. Like, that is a large, publicly traded company. You know, Devolver are fucking humongous, right? I forget how many staff they are, but
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's like if you go through the list, right, you've got Enter the Gungeon, Hollow Knight, Celeste, Cuphead, Undertale, Lisa, Neon White, Rocket League. I imagine most people, especially if you're in the kind of audience that's going to know and think about games, especially if you're in the indie game kind of audience, you're going to know basically all of those. I think the only one people may not maybe recognize there is Lisa, because it's a little bit more niche, and that's kind of where you get into it, where it's like, there's definitely like Enter the Gungeon, everyone knows that. Hollow Knight, everyone knows that. Lisa, less so. So you can immediately see, oh yeah, well, Lisa's like a full 10 out of 10. Extremely, like, how do you even describe it? It's just super irreverent, crazy, like old school RPG. And it is absolutely fantastic. And they talked about like the Game of the Year list featuring stuff like Hades. And people clowned immediately for Hades because like, oh, that little indie game that no one knows about, Hades? Shut the fuck up, clown. It's like, no, well, obviously it's
Supergiant are maybe a premium plus indie.
Yeah, that's the thing where like Hades definitely it's still an indie. It's just an indie that's well known by people.
Yeah.
And that's a case where you look at stuff like I guess Downwell there. Into the Breach wasn't even that popular at the time, largely, even though it came from a decent background. Stuff like Inscription.
Developers of FTL.
Yeah, I mean, as we point out here, Monolith and Lisa are actually genuinely super niche, and they're both exceedingly good in their niche. So even the fact that they're there, it's like, well, and then if you think about, what you're going to do for an edit, right? And this is the thing that it's kind of hard to think of the whole thing, but if you're making a video and you want to make sure people understand what you're saying, and you want people to have that immediate recognition of, like almost like you're trying to sell a narrative instead of being completely balanced and kind of honest there. Not to say it's dishonest, but you're going to put on the footage of the popular games. You're going to have the more footage of that. People are going to recognize it more and understand what you mean.
Yeah.
Because you're going to say, hey, I'm going to publish indie games that are a bit like X and Y. And people are like, what the fuck are those? I've never heard of those. Then that might work, but you're going to, for the average audience, especially when you're looking at millions of views, you're going to get more people going, oh, yes, I agree. If you say, I'm going to go find stuff like Enter the Gungeon. I'm going to go find stuff like Neon White. That's the thing where you correct a little bit for what the person is actually, or what the person or the unit, if you want to call them like a big publisher now, what they're actually doing. They're not going to actually aim for the most niche audience, because you aim for the most niche audience in recognition, then you're going to run into problems of people just going, what's that? But this avoids that.
There's another angle to that too. That's a statement of intent.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible that, say, Enter the Gungeon maybe would have come out and not done that well. His point is, we want to be able to fund games that will be like this. So that's the type of thing that they are looking to create. It's not him saying that Enter the Gungeon and Hollow Knight are tiny indies that nobody's ever heard of, like some people I think have kind of been strawmanning as a way to laugh at the big dumb YouTuber, as I think, is basically the connotation. No, it's saying, I want to find the next Enter the Gungeon, the next Hollow Knight, and ensure that it gets made and ensure that it gets eyeballs. Because funny enough, imagine if Vampire Survivors did not get the ball rolling. Imagine if Loop Hero, a Devolver game, did not get the ball rolling. Imagine if Mini Healer just always stayed super niche, and we maybe helped get its ball. There's other people I'm sure too have helped, but it's that thing. The ball gets rolling. It gets a few more eyeballs. Some, internet people like us talk about it. The ball keeps on rolling, gets bigger and bigger. That's what they're looking to create, and being able to do that in-house as a publisher is, extremely hard. Now, he does follow up by saying that in today's indie landscape, buying a game can be like buying a loot crate in a Counter-Strike. You don't know what you're going to get, but you're probably going to get sad. It's the sort of thing where, like, okay, is that the most precise statement in the world? No, even saying, like, many of the true games out there are being drowned out in a sea of mediocrity can be a problem. That's why we would recommend the Steam Interactive Recommender that is a part of Steam Labs.
Yeah.
But the point there is, there's a lot of games that come out, and in a world where there's like loads and loads of 7 out of 10s and 8 out of 10s, and you're trying to be a new publisher, and you're like, how am I going to flop my big dick in the table and get some noise? It's saying, the way that if Devolver's label is on something, people take it more seriously?
Yeah.
That's what we want to do. And then just going on to say, hey, play loads of games, understand what ideas work, what ideas kind of like never work, what things are fresh and stuff like that. Look, somebody who plays a lot of games is going to have more of an understanding of that. Somebody who shows those games to an audience and sees that audience reaction is also going to have an understanding of that. He will probably have a fairly decent eye for product market fit. I would say that perhaps the blind spot would be if he was creating his own game. But I think when you have that layer of separation combined with that level of experience, should be grand. It's just that when it comes to new media streamers, that sort of thing, there is a lot of resistance and pushback within the sort of guts of the games industry. I even remember kind of having to roll my eyes, not literally, and I won't say who it is, but it was somebody who was fairly major in a fairly major publisher, saying sort of their opinions and some, new media related things. And I was just like, you have decided to not get on the boat and you are calcifying. GG, sir. And you see a lot of that out there. Mm-hmm. So, okay, maybe it came off as being a little bit headstrong, but
that's his character.
If you're going to make your big announcement, you should probably go full ham.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing where there's a lot of people kind of take that as, or have resistance to people being like headstrong and like super confident stuff, because there's kind of a little bit of how society's moved a little bit, but it still works on like a subconscious level and for more people than it doesn't. So it's like a little bit of a risk of just going full headstrong, but sometimes it works. And that's just the thing where Dunkey, because you were saying there, but played a lot of games. A lot of people go, well, I've read a lot of books. Does that mean I could be a publisher? It's like,
no, you don't be like Garth Marenghi. Hey, I've written more books than I've read.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing where there's an element of that where you could play a lot of games all day long and never actually think about it or learn. But if you're someone who's working on a YouTube channel, you're going to be, and especially trying to go, well, what games are getting really popular? What games, can I highlight that will have that kind of sense? And that's, if you think about it, you'll learn that skill. It's the difference between practice and just doing something. Where you can play, you could play casual games of a shooter forever and not be very good, but as soon as you start like the intentional ranked climb, you start to actually get better. It's that, but for everything else, I guess.
So to kind of go on through things then, obviously there is just there's like a few inherent downsides, like let's just say
loads of them, like
there's a breakdown in communications if you're the developer and your publisher's also a big media org. That obviously there's a way where you could be scared about that. I would also equally say though, jiu-jitsu is a motherfucker.
Yeah.
And the weight of a big media org absolutely could be used against them. Imagine if there's a brutal story that came out with Devolver. People would side with the small developer, and the weight and scale of Devolver would then be used against them.
Yeah, especially if you lose control of the narrative of like what you are as a big org, because Devolver are kind of, they're getting big enough that people are starting to see them as less than, oh, this cute little indie publisher. People are starting to go, oh, you're now hoovering up every game that looks vaguely like it's in your kind of market, and that's fine, of course. But people are starting to like that mode switch of how people are thinking is starting to happen very, very slowly.
Yeah.
And you could see how that could, manifest pretty badly. And if they have like one absolute stinker and the dev goes, that's because they forced me into making a Devolver game instead of their own game. But then it works both ways, because I remember Devolver saying they're actually kind of pissed off at the amount of times like people make games almost like with big flags saying, hello, we would be a great Devolver indie game. Please pay us.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes both ways there. But.
I think as with most things that turn out to be a drama within the sort of indie space, Mike Rose, who runs No More Robots, which is an indie publisher, they've had quite a lot of success with the likes of Yes, Your Grace and Descenders, said 3 different huge YouTubers, not Dunkey, asked for calls with me in the last 18 months saying they're considering starting their own publisher and could they get some advice. I mean, he's definitely a good man to go to for that. So pretty sure we're going to see an influx of I could do that YouTubers having a pop at publishing. You can dunk in these people all you want, but let's be honest, most indie publishers are started by people who don't really know what they're doing. No More Robots surely was.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Like, here's an example. So let's just say, our current project is done with a publisher. Let's just say we're in an okay enough financial position that perhaps we feel like we can self-publish a title after that. Well, after a little bit of that, through working with a publisher, through knowing other developers who work with the publishers, we now vaguely know how a publisher runs, the sorts of things a publisher does, right? When we then go to attempt to self-publish our own things, if we wanted to do localization, we would know how to do that. If we wanted to do QA with an external QA partner, we would know how to do that. Media marketing, we do that already. There's actually quite, so that's just a way where by the time that we start self-publishing, we'll actually have had experience in just about all of the areas of what a publisher does. So let's just say we try to actually become a publisher in a few years' time. That's all shit we've done before. And I do want that to happen, but that's why we are going with, development first. Because the whole, I could do that thing, that's how everything starts, And maybe people treat it differently because it's YouTubers or something, and there are reasons to treat that differently, because when a veteran AAA developer of, let's just say, 12 years industry experience thinks, I could do that, well, on the core development bit, they are certainly pretty damn believable. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of that is why we decided not to do crowdfunding, because we could probably convince people that we could do that, but we wouldn't be sure enough that we could do that ourselves. So it would be very immoral. That's the thing. And as long as you talk to experts, it's really not that much of a problem. And that's why we want to talk a little bit about what a publishing house actually offers, because I think that'll help people understand this. It's probably not Dunkey and Leah having bags of money, saying, here's a bag of money, no contract, no nothing, whatever. We don't care, we're cool. No, it's not going to be that. So, obviously, funding, I think you guys understand how funding works. Development support is one thing that Bigmode said that they're going to be able to provide. So, basically, if you need to network with somebody of a particular skill set, let's just say you need a shader artist who can achieve a certain style, well, I assume they're going to try to use their size to be able to, provide that. That's the sort of thing where a smaller indie publisher is not going to be as able to do that, but the larger ones, they more are going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you watch a Dunkey video and the end is just like bigmode.com/jobs. Go there if you're this. And obviously in his style, it would literally just be on screen for half a second and the funny sound effect, but that would work substantially better for getting, here's the people who are more inclined to actually want to be on your project and be better at it. Go there.
We got PR and community management. Now, this can go a few different ways. Often it's subcontracted, so access to lists of press and influencers. That could be held, of course, by them themselves. They could then go to a company like, say, Evolve or many different PR companies that exist within the game space, and they could subcontract that out. So the publisher would essentially be there supporting the developer via money. The publisher will almost have, it's one thing that is not here, but it is a core function of a publisher. They will have a production team, maybe a product manager. So you'll be assigned a project manager for your game. You'll probably have, whoever it is on the publisher's production team. You'll be liaising with them to ensure that things are on track. And whenever things have to change or go off track a little bit, they're the person you talk to work out a plan that's good for both parties as to how you get back on track. So that's not here, but that is one of the core things that a publisher needs. So a publisher is going to have in-house, some degree of in-house marketing, in-house production. There's, the funding and all the stuff sort of like handled by the CEO. And as for the legal side, they'll almost certainly just have a law firm that, they have, whatever relationship with to handle all those things, like the contract. Because ultimately, a publication contract is not the hardest thing in the world to make. Now, it definitely is a bunch of work, but it's the sort of thing you could go and look at lots of other publishing contracts that have been published, right? Raw Fury published their standard boilerplate, and you could essentially try to learn from that. You could ask some people for a favor, take someone out to lunch, go to a law firm that's worked in this sort of thing before. So people are like, just saying like, oh, I hope Dunkey knows how to draft this. It's like, motherfucker, Dunkey doesn't have to draft that. He has to know that he has to get one drafted well and then make the steps to get it drafted well, which, funny enough, is what every indie publisher does, because it's, unless you're Devolver, it's not like you have a massive in-house law department. There's also, PR community management, so obviously, yeah, you could see that with Dunkey. QA, porting and localization. So this is a fun thing. There will either be an internal team or they will manage subcontracting out, and same thing goes for merchandising. So these are all things that, they can vary depending on the scale of the publisher, and, for going, say, additional porting, QA, localization, those will all, how those are handled in terms of like those costs and revenues will, of course, have to be part of, the funding waterfall, right? Which it could maybe be an 80-20 flip. An 80-20 flip would basically be, for the first, until your publisher has recouped this amount of money, 80% of sales goes to the publisher, 20% to you. And then as more money goes in, it eventually goes from 80-20 to 20-80. That's just like one example. There are other publishers who will just go like, say, 60-40, but full recoup first. There's many different contracts out there of highly varying degrees of goodness to the developer, suffice to say. But the reason why I go through all of this is, obviously we do YouTube on multiple different channels. We run a production team, all of that stuff. We also have a game studio with like a decent set of staff, actually. We have, subcontracted things, outsourced things. We've worked with a publisher. A publisher is outsourced to some PR stuff, outsourced to some QA. Like, we kind of know how all these things work. My hope is that, this bit of drama could be used to demystify how parts of this whole process work.
Yeah, and there's plenty to be excited about given the whole thing, right? Because Dunkey said in a video, I'm not looking for creative control, but I do want to be involved. I'm sick of sitting on the sidelines waiting for great games to appear. I want to get in there and help make it happen. Because this is something that we'll see a definite step change in how video games are being published coming forward, given what Micro said about, 3 different huge YouTubers that weren't Dunkey getting in touch with them. So there's clearly there's hunger to be a publisher, because people are kind of noticing, there's so many games that are going unpublished. What are the bigger publishers doing? They're finding their own, either they're a big AAA publisher and they're just doing whatever they want, and a lot of the gaming community are like, this is bullshit, I don't want any of this absolute trash that you're pumping out. Obviously, they're still making loads of money. But then there's even Devolver, and they're honing in on their niche, right? Which means if there's a publisher, and then there's plenty of it, there's Fellow Traveler, there's Raw Fury, all those things, they have their own niche. But there's still a lot of games that will go completely under the radar because they're not kind of, maybe not in a niche, but more, there's no concept for them. There's no idea. There's no, this will obviously work. It's people trying to explore the boundaries of what cool indie games could be. Because the example that we're going to go into just very briefly is Powerwash Simulator. Yeah. Because they spoke a decent while ago now, after, making their 3 million players, which is a hell of a lot of players for a Powerwash Simulator. And they just went into how they were talking about, they could not convince any publisher to give it a shot. They could not convince anyone because they're like, wait, Powerwash?
Are you fucking mad?
Yeah, so it's like a shooter, but you don't kill anyone? It's a shooter, but you don't have but with a power washer? That seems boring. That seems pointless. And ultimately, Square Enix Collective kind of went for it. But they went in actually about how demoralized they were. We're going to need you to do all of these video game standard things, We're going to need you to do all these boilerplate things that we know are marketing beats, that we know work, as opposed to, hey, we see your vision, developer. We'll take a risk on it. Ultimately, that did work with Square Enix Collective. And it's like, that's why I think there's, I guess, things to be excited about here with Dunkey, because especially when Dunkey's like taste comes into it. I know people have generally disagree, but that's what taste is. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Not every game that Dunkey's going to say, oh, I absolutely want to publish that. People might go, well, that's kind of shit, or I don't like that idea. But given how much like reverence Dunkey has for the, especially like the sense of humor that comes through in that, because you could say it's cynical sense of humor and it's just meme culture everywhere else, but there is a genuine, like, you can tell, oh, that's how Dunkey is as like a creator. So you imagine that would manifest in stuff like Undertale. Because Undertale will be like, good luck publishing that. I mean, obviously it got published, but, you know, good luck publishing something that's along the same vibe, but without that, like, standard to go by. That was kind of lucky that happened. Same with, like, Lisa. Same with, you know, even, like, the example earlier of, like, Monolith is, like, those are crazy small games, but you could see games where Dunkey's like, oh, yeah, that's right down my alley. No one else would publish this. But you've got the eye for quality, so it's actually good. And you see that with maybe other publishers coming in, other, like, not publishing standard publishers, just people who are publishing in a sense. Obviously you do have to build an organization, but you can have a unique spin on it. So it won't be this case of, you know, we don't know how many games are dead. We don't know how many games are absolutely stellar ideas and the developers have the moxie to make it really, really great, but they don't get past publishing. They don't get past well, I've got 20k savings, I'll make as much of this, you know, I'll try to get this done, but I need more money. We don't know how many don't actually make it. So that's the thing of more publishers, especially more publishers from unique angles.
Yeah.
It's just going to make video games a hell of a lot better, especially if they can kind of escalate the ones that are going to, I guess, just flounder. Because I am honestly also kind of personally sick of just how many games there are. And like, this is getting really brutal for me to decide which, and it's on the like publishers to elevate those. And obviously it works for like Xbox, or like, here's Metal Hellsinger on Game Pass. You're like, hell yeah, that's great. So more interesting people and more interesting ideas in this kind of market going, oh yeah, that is not like a game anyone else would have published. We'll do it, and we'll make sure it's good. And there you go.
Ultimately, I think we're just seeing a new generation of stuff that is enabled by a creator economy that has resulted in a different generation of businesses. To take a look at this, like from another example, there's a tech YouTuber, Sarah Dici, doing on it, like, because I generally do like iOS devices, you know what, it's just like a bunch of, you know, pretty neat stands, but ones that are quite carefully done, that just have nice features that people would appreciate. Linus Tech Tips. I know now that warranty gate is over, Linus Tech Tips with the bag. Like, that's an example where it's like, I remember Linus really liking the Razer backpack. And evidently he's just like, fuck it, we can do shit now, let's try it. They've used a shed load of screwdrivers, you know, in their business. So they make a screwdriver, and it's a screwdriver that has all the things that they want. Like, that is a new thing. Take isn't the mod mat from Gamers Nexus. That's another example of, they build PCs all the time, so they want to make their own mat that it has the features that they want. And, you know, they're developing it, they're publishing it, they're getting it This is just the creator economy evolving and moving on. That's all that it is. I think, though, and in fairness, Twitch and YouTube definitely do produce results that are worth being clowned on at times.
Yes,
but I think there is still a default kind of looking down the nose at that sort of thing that is pervasive. So ultimately with Dunkey, it's another publisher in the mix. What's the worst thing that could happen for the broad audience? Like, what, you don't like a game? But ultimately for developers, it means there's more people. There is one more set of, you know, meetings that you can have when you go to the Gamescom business area. Wahoo. Yeah,
I feel like this happens every maybe 6 months or so, because we've been running this channel for a couple of years now. Every 6 months or so, I have this urge. I'm just like, we are, at long last, we are in a golden age of video games. And I've been saying that every 6 months the past 2 years.
It's been so many good games.
Because it just keeps getting better and better. You look at, you know, obviously people go, but the AAA, you're like, yeah, you're completely right. That is a complete nightmare hellscape. All of the crypto and NFT stuff, complete nightmare hellscape. But that's not all of video games. We can just, we can cordon that off in a corner and go, there's hell in video game form. It's in the corner. Don't go near it. Build a big wall around it and say, all right, come over here to where the good video games are, because there's more of them than you could feasibly imagine.
Yeah.
That's kind of it, where that's just going to continue getting better as games get bigger and more people go, oh yeah, good video games? Fuck it, I'll buy those.
Yeah, so I would say good luck to Dunkey & Co.
Hell yeah.
If you want to check out the game that we are, in-house developing with our studio, then you can check out The Pale Beyond on Steam. I can't tell you the release date stuff, but it has been announced for 2022, and you're probably realizing that there is every day less and less of 2022 left.
Oh, don't tell me that.
But yeah, sort of Antarctic survival narrative role-playing game. If you like the likes of, say, the Terror, which we actually started this project before the Terror came out, but there you go. I mean, hell, they actually found Shackleton's boat.
Oh yeah,
they found the Endurance, which was awesome for the team to see. But yeah, if you want to check out our game, and if you're here and around when this video actually is out, then you can go play the demo. Just that version of the demo is not ultra-wide friendly. So
yes.
yeah, there's that. Okay, wish this The Pale Beyond on Steam, and goodbye.